Can I ask you a big question?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this documentary?
So I guess I'm doing a documentary because I wanted to give something to my kids that explained a little bit more about where we come from. I don't think we have a lot of connection to our family history, me in particular. So I kind of wanted them to understand what my grandfather's life was like since I grew up with him. He's getting on in years. I really don't think he'll be in a place to tell them the stories. So originally I just wanted to do something to kind of be able to give them something.
If you ever change your mind about leaving me behind, oh, bring it to me, bring your sweet loving, bring it on home to me. Ooh yeah, ooh yeah, ooh yeah, ooh yeah.
This is Beckley, West Virginia. I was raised just a few miles away from Beckley by my grandfather in an unincorporated town called Staniford. My family came to West Virginia for the same reasons most families come to the state, to work in the coal mines. My great-grandfather came to West Virginia in the early 1900s to work for the McAlpin Coal Company. My grandfather, Alfonso, grew up in McAlpin with his younger brother. When they turned 18, they worked briefly in the mines before my grandfather decided to join the military. After serving in the Air Force, he moved to Beckley with his wife and 2 kids and worked at the VA hospital until his retirement. My mother moved to California when I was 7 years old to find work, and I stayed in West Virginia with my grandfather. He knew there weren't many opportunities in our area and encouraged me to consider joining the military. I signed up to enter the military at 16 and enlisted in the United States Navy. In the late 19th century, after the Civil War, the nation was expanding their railroad system, which drove up the demand for a replacement for firewood as a source of energy. The need for coal led to an influx of immigrant and black miners. That is what brought my great-grandfather to the state. The coal barons, the owners who lived in New York, Philadelphia, and London, owned and controlled the entire towns that they built for the miners around the towns. These coal camps originally began as collections of tents, boarding houses, and shanties until more miners came to work in the mine. Once enough miners came to work in the mine, the companies could justify the company stores, which would become one of the first permanent buildings in each camp. Most miners were paid in scrip in lieu of U.S. currency. Scrip were tokens that were paid to miners that could only be spent in the company store and on the products that they carried. This system cut miners off from obtaining financial freedom and kept them dependent upon the mines. They couldn't buy things that the company's store didn't provide, like cars or really even save money that could be spent anywhere outside the camp. For the most part, they didn't even own the homes they lived in. In time, schools and churches were built to create a sense of community. If the mines were profitable, the companies would put money into these communities to make them more tenable. Because there weren't any state-built roads leading to the mines, many miners were forced to live in these coal camps in order to work. Beckley, much like most of the towns across southern West Virginia, relied heavily on the coal industry. As coal production declined across the state, many of the coal mining companies went out of business. They simply closed down their operations and left. The residents not only lost their only source of income, they also lost the services that were provided by the infrastructure that the mines had built. Today, you can see the evidence of how devastating this was for these towns by the abandoned company buildings, parks, and schools that have been overtaken by nature. Because these were unincorporated towns, the state didn't have the resources to maintain the services and infrastructure that was built with no other employment in the area. Many people stayed because the homes that the mines provided were the only places they had to live, and they were the only homes they had known.
My name is Alfonso Morrow. Born in McAppen, West Virginia, 1932. All I know is my daddy was born in Louisiana in 1910. My mother was born in North Carolina, Boston, North Carolina. God, what year that was. As a little kid, I used to get up in the bed and play. She was sick. So I get up in the bed and play and hug her and kiss her, you know. I went to the hospital one time to see her. Fell off the hospital bed trying to climb up on it. And she tried to reach down to get me. I can remember that year. We are now standing on the spot where Mark Twain High School was at, the segregated school here. Black folks couldn't go. So we had to go down 9 miles to another school to get an education. My father's name was Fred A. Morrow. My mother's name was Minnie Hunt Morrow. I love my dad.
Yeah?
Yeah, I just couldn't show him how much I loved, you know. Well, it looked like sometimes that he didn't accept the love that I had for him. So when he got sick one time, I had to carry him up the steps down in Glen White. So I picked him up, you know, he got out the hospital a week, boy. Sit him down on the couch on the porch so he can just look at the scenery for a while. And I said, Daddy, I love you. He said, I love you too, son. So I don't think he thought I could carry him up there, but I picked him up like a baby and carried him on up to the house. Up there where you see that log cabinet, that's where the high school used to be at. And somebody burned it down.
You want to walk over there?
No, the guy might shoot. We can go across the bridge if we want.
Yeah, let's walk around.
Brett Primer High School. It shut down when they burned it down in 60, 65, 63, somewhere along there. We used to throw some homebrew bottles out there to get cold. You know what homebrew is?
Sure do.
Yeah, that's where we throw them out there on the string and let it hang out there to get cooled down, and when we get out of school, we'll sit with some homebrew. They called me and told me my daddy had an accident at the mines, and so I went over to the hospital to check on him to see what had happened, you know. He fell up on the belt, whatever it was. They carried the coal out of the mines or something, and his hand got caught in that belt, and he pulled the skin off that hand from right here and that thumb, and he made that thumb out of whack. It was short, and it was a little thin thumb. So he lifted a little towel up their head over that hand and said, "Son, look at that." Said, "I'm coming out the mine." I said, "Well, I hate it for you to get hurt to come out, but I'm glad you're coming out." This bridge right here came across, and there was a store in here. Apple Coal Company store right in here. And as you went on down the road, there was a filling station where you got your gas, one pump. Doctor's office up here, superintendent's office up here, houses up there, church used to be up there. No more. Went on up a little farther. Coal Company house where the miners lived at. And the church was up there. Used to be a set of garages over there. This gap right in here all the way down to this curve where the store set in there. You went in there and bought all your stuff that you need for your 2 weeks at home, first and a half. I left town. So I went to Violin, New Jersey, Delaware, came back home and went in service. They had a club down in Uri where we went the last time for the miners, called the Miners Club. That's where they went to. Where they could dance and sip their beer and stuff and have a good time.
Was it only for black folks?
Yeah, at that time.
We found this online, and we weren't sure if this was the script that you grew up with, but we wanted you to take a look.
Just like happened.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's MacAlpin's script?
MacAlpin Coal Company. See, it said MacAlpin Coal right there.
Okay.
What did that cost you?
Don't worry about it.
No, I'm not. Because we seen the penny yesterday, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's something.
Yeah. So this little MacAlpin script.
MacAlpin script, Coal Company.
Now, what happened with the MacAlpin script? Like, did they
Not the company went down, it just disappeared. But you giving me this?
Yeah, of course.
Oh. If I had me a little chain, I'd have it around my neck.
I can probably take care of that.
That's all right.
Yeah.
MacAlpin Coal Company. Would you like to see my penny?
Yeah, if you got it.
See, that's winding up coal. See?
Yeah.
the same as that right there. That's MacAlpin, but it went into this right here later.
So the MacAlpin script became Winding Gulf script.
Yeah, that became Winding Gulf.
Okay. I knew about it. I came down here a couple times when I was a kid, but I don't think I really understood how bad it was until we talked about it a little bit more. I didn't understand kind of what it was like to have to grow up here. And then you come down the mountain. I mean, it's kind of bad in West Virginia all around, but no, I don't have a connection at all to this place. I mean, my granddad talks about it all the time. I think seeing it, I got a better understanding of who he is, why he does things the way he does, and things I never understood. I think even the fact him talking about not having running water, and the fact him making me take cold showers all the time as a kid, like, I get that a little bit more. I understand a little bit more why he processes things the way he does, but I mean, a huge part of me doesn't want to be down here too often. So when I first enlisted, it was me and two other guys from West Virginia who went together. I didn't know them, but we kind of stuck together through boot camp. But after boot camp, they got stationed somewhere else. I went to Camp Lejeune immediately after that and was put with Marine Corps infantry units after that. So I didn't run into anyone else from West Virginia except for some guys who had met somebody else who was black from West Virginia, and they asked me about him, and it turned out to be my cousin. But that was the only other time I had some kind of connection with West Virginia.
What's that guy's name over there?
That's David Lawson. Another cousin.
Just said that's the
He looks like a Lawson too.
You want to jump in the driver's chair? Jump up.
All right. Most people call me Clarence. That's my middle
Clarence
name.
Marcus.
Yes.
Dora, Annette,
Dora who?
Dora Bronax, Anderson,
Dora.
your grandmother.
That's my grandmother.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is
I didn't know
Dora's
that.
grandmother.
Yeah. Wow. That's my aunt. That's my dad's sister.
And
That's your dad's
My
sister.
father's sister.
So y'all are
Your
first cousins
grandmother.
once removed is what that is.
Second cousin.
Second cousin? Second
Yeah.
cousin?
Second cousins. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, man, it's good to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, I've never met really anybody on that side of the family. Like, I met my granny Dora. I met Dora, and I knew Aunt James Anderson,
Okay.
her husband for a bit, and her son Skip.
Skippy. Yeah.
So you know him.
Yeah, I know Skippy.
That's
Yeah,
my dad.
I've known. Yeah.
That's my dad.
Man, I've known
Yeah.
Skippy since I was probably like 2 years old when I first came back from
Shit,
California.
really?
When I first came back from California, I ran around with Skippy like this.
Really?
Him and my dad are like that.
Still?
Yeah.
There you are on the left there, Dad.
I had always heard stories from my grandfather about what life was like in the coal camps,
Oh, there you are on the
but I'd
left,
never
too.
really taken the time to ask him all the details.
pretty small.
Yeah, you were pretty young.
After
Your mother
speaking
and-
with him, I wanted to find more people who had grown up in the camps and hear their stories too.
There's MacAlpin.
Louis, I went and I found something that I wanted to show you. So we were talking a little bit about script before.
Uh-huh.
That MacAlpin had script, and I went out.
Yeah.
It took me a little while, but I wanted to show you this. I found some MacAlpin script.
Oh. Well, I can't see it, Marcus.
Thought of that.
I know what it's like. I remember it because this is something that I'm not too proud of my father, but you know how to use script, don't you?
I do, but you can talk a little bit about it if you'd like to.
My father would buy a script, and he would, I think it's correct that he would buy it with dollars, and he would buy $1 worth of script for 75 cents. So, in essence, when my mother went to the company store to
to buy groceries, she already had a 25% discount.
Oh.
Because she paid for it with script.
James Anderson.
Charlene's dad? Charlene Anderson's dad?
No. Bly, they married Bly. Reverend Bly's daughter.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Rosetta. Rosetta, Michael Anderson.
Michael?
Is Michael?
I'm not sure.
But his daddy's name was James, though, wasn't it?
Big Mike's dad was James.
Right.
And
so
then
we're in the right.
Mike, and then we got
we're in the right
another
ballpark.
Mike.
So she should.
All right.
Go on and
Thank you.
interview her.
No.
My father was from Georgia. He migrated here to West Virginia because of work. He needed work. And once he settled in here, he married my mom, and he worked in the coal mines, and he became a Baptist minister preaching. Matter of fact, he's well known throughout southern West Virginia as Reverend Henry Elmer Day. There isn't a whole lot of opportunities here at the present time. I left in '65 after graduation due to the same reason, that there were no great places of employment here. There were no factories, in order for one to capitalize on. So when I left, I went to Washington, D.C., where I worked there for about 3 months before becoming drafted by the military service.
So I went to Greater Beckley. I graduated there. And I went into the military right after high school.
Okay.
I was in the Navy for 8 years, but I spent large majority of the Marine Corps units. I was with 3rd Battalion.
Great.
I was with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines.
Okay.
Yeah, loved it.
Yeah, I was with 3-7.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know 7th Marines.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got drafted by the Army. I didn't want to go in the Army. I said, well, if I'm going to war, I want to go with one of the baddest groups around, and that was the Marine Corps. So I enlisted into the Marine Corps, and I served about 1 year and 4 months. I was wounded in Vietnam after my tour of duty, which didn't last very long. 4 months I was wounded. Came back to Beckley, West Virginia, my hometown. Entered school here, went to Morris Harvey, which is now the University of Charleston, got a degree, and filtrated into the workforce. I'm just a West Virginia boy at heart. I love the mountains, I love the rivers and streams here. I love our climate. We have the best of seasons. Our winters are not too awfully cold, and our summers can be mild. Of course, granted, there are times when it can become very hot and humid, but overall, we have the best climates. There was a school located in Raleigh area known as Raleigh Miners Institute, and it was an all-white school. It was an elementary school, and I went to Piney Oaks, gone to Piney Oaks for about 3-4 years when the schools, the law was passed to integrate schools back in around 54, 55. We were told that we as Afro-Americans could go to white schools in our general location, and we wouldn't have to ride the bus from Raleigh to Beckley, which was something like maybe 2-3 miles away. By going to those elementary schools in our general location, that meant we could go home for lunch. We wouldn't have to go through a lot of time for catching the bus and riding the bus for, say, 30 minutes to to go outside of our general locale. We were able to socialize as whites. Of course, it was difficult times at that time, but we worked it out. We worked it out. There hasn't been a whole lot of opportunities for our young people. Businesses is looking for more qualified blacks or better blacks with character and education. Once we fitted the bill and receive employment, we very seldom let those jobs go. We stayed there until either we retired or till the business closed down. For young people coming up in this area, I mean, there's a lack of jobs for blacks as well as whites until there is some type of industry coming into the area. And the better paying jobs is further up north and even down south. I would say the best thing for any young persons to do is continue their education. Make sure they get a good education. When you're speaking of raising a family or getting furthering your education, then one needs to leave to do so. Like I said, the opportunities here are at a minimum.
My family came from Virginia. My grandfather was he looked like an Indian. So he pretended that he was an Indian. He put his hair in a duckbill, had black. My mother ended up there. My father came. I don't know how he got there, but all I know he ended up in there. My favorite memories was going up to take my uncle lunch. My uncle worked on the machine that would pull the coal cars out of the mines. And I would go over and take him lunch, and he would take me down in the mine on the engine, let me see what was going on. And coming out of that mine, everybody was black. So you didn't know the difference between the black man and the white man, you know. My father worked there. All my uncles worked there. My cousins, had a lot of my cousins that worked down in the coal mine. I was born and raised in town. We didn't have no movies, so we would have to walk up to Stokesburg. The people that lived in Stokesburg and McAllen would come to the movie in Stokesburg, and we would go to the movie in Stokesburg. So we didn't have no bicycle, no cars, no nothing like that. So we'd walk the track, we'd go to the movie, and then we'd walk back home. We didn't miss no movies because we was into the Long Ranger, and if you miss one, then you'd be behind. And if you had a buddy trying to tell you about it, you never understand what he was saying because they'd be getting carried away. But my life on the coal camp was really good. I really enjoyed it. We had older women in the neighborhood that would take the younger women under their wing and would teach them how to cook. Teach them how to, take care of a man when they got married, If you got sick, they had the old women in. Now they got all them stupid pills and stuff that they give you, but back in them days, your mama would give you some honey and some cinnamon, or she'll slap an asphyxia bag around your neck. look at them running.
That's hilarious.
You be sucking on that asphyxia bag, because you didn't want to catch polio. They had lemons and they had honey and they had all kinds of different remedies that they would give you. And believe it or not, it would knock that cold right out of you. And next day you didn't know you had a cold. We had a lady in the neighborhood, if you hurt yourself, you go over her house and she'd sit down and talk to you. I think she hypnotized us because she would talk the pain right out of your arm or leg and whatever you was hurting there, she would do it. And it worked. It worked. And we didn't have hot running water. They boiled it on the stove. We had a pot-belly stove. They would boil it on the stove. And then they would pour the water into we had these little metal tubs. And when they wash your clothes, they had the tub and they had a washing board. They washed the clothes on the washboard. Nothing fancy. And I don't think anybody in the neighborhood had a bicycle. If they did, they stole it. They stole it from the white boy. We sure didn't get it from no black dude. But we made our own bicycles. We made our own sleds. We made our own wagons. We'd go out and find some old wheels somewhere and make us a wagon. We'd get us some ropes We'd go out and dig some holes in the ground, you know, and we'd play marbles, and it was a lot of fun. We could take a clothes hanger and take a bicycle wheel and use it. You tell a kid to do that now, they want to shoot you. They go, what are you talking about? And we would have fun doing that. Or we made our own roller skates. We made our own everything. We made our own kites. They couldn't buy no kite nowhere. What you do is you get a newspaper, you get you some sticks, and you make and you go get some of your mother's flour and get you some newspaper and that's what you put on there. Get some of your mother's old stockings and hang it from the tail, and you was up and running. Every campground had a company store, and what they would do is they would give your daddy and them would get stripped. All the boys had the same kind of shirt because they only sold one kind of shirt, and that was the one that looked like a prison shirt with the stripes around it and all. Everybody had the same kind of shirts. Everybody had the same kind of pants. I don't know about the underwear, but everybody had. I know they had the shirts. And I mean, in the company store, you buy everything. You bought all your food. You bought all your clothes. But everybody at the company store knew you because they knew you from the neighborhood. And we had one doctor, white doctor, took care of everybody in the neighborhood. The guy that owned the company store, owned the company, had his own big house, the superintendent, and we lived in those little small houses. We had outhouses. We didn't have no inside bathrooms, and we shared our house with the people next door. The guy would come around about once or twice a year and dump all the outhouses. We call him the honey bucket man. And he would come around and dump all the outhouses, and we didn't have no toilet paper. Everybody used the Sears and Roebuck catalog. We either had the Sears and Roebuck or the newspaper, and wasn't too many newspapers around either. None of us want to go into the coal mine because it just, you know, it wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to. It's not that we were ashamed of our parents working in the coal mine, but we just wanted to do something different. So 90% of us joined the military. Some of us joined the Air Force, some of us joined the Navy, some of us joined the Marines. A lot of my friends was drafted. Now they went to Vietnam and ended up getting killed. Like I said, the military was the best thing for us, we felt. Because what we wanted was the GI Bill. We wanted to get out of the military and go back and go to college to get a degree so we could get a better job. I love West Virginia. You know, and I don't let nobody talk bad about West Virginia, not in front of me, because I love it. This is my home. This will always be my home, you know. And nobody's gonna badmouth West Virginia in front of me, because I will, you know. In fact, I saw a guy at the airport, and I was telling you, and he said, "Once a West Virginian, always a West Virginian." You got that right, and you better say it nice.
I like it. I love it.
Because I didn't know that.
My father had worked in the mines early on. I always tell the story, my dad was always a big kid, they say. He was well over 6 feet tall. So his father got injured in the mines when my dad was about 10, and that was before Social Security and all that. Apparently the superintendent said, "You got a big kid, bring him down, we'll start him out on the tipple." So my dad went to work and took care of his 9 brothers and sisters and his mom and dad when he was like 10. It was just sort of like expected that you would go to school. And I remember we had some neighbors who had a lot of kids, and one of the older sons said that he got a little, let's just say ambitious at one point, and decided that he was not going to go to school anymore. And his dad gave what we considered like the pat answer for parents back then. And he said, in the morning, there's 3 things leaving here: the school bus, Questenberry bus lines, and the man trip in the mines. Be on one of them. So for most of us, we was on the bus.
So I'm shutting the camera here.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, that's excellent. That is excellent.
Jobs played out, gosh, early 50s, I'd say. And because I can remember all my uncles, and because like I said, not only my dad, but my uncles and everybody worked in the mines. So that's when the migration started, and everybody moved north. A lot of them ended up in Ohio and Detroit, like in auto industry or something like that, because people had to find work. So people started to scatter then, and and like I said, and eventually everybody was out and gone, and the camp ceased to exist. It's a very, I guess it's a very different kind of existence than most people are used to, because African Americans only make up, I think they say, about 3% of the population here. But it's different, I guess, because of the state's history in and of itself. We have a history that's kind of confusing growing out of the Civil War like we did, and there's still a lot of folks who have a big, I guess, affiliation with, or maybe even some kind of misplaced nostalgia for the South. So a lot of those old traditions still exist. So people who think that there is no bias or whatever here would be mistaken. But it's very different, because having lived in the South, it's not as manifest or open, but it still exists. So people who coming back here find that not only is the economy somewhat depressed, because after having tied its allegiance to coal for all these years, you have a lot of people who are really, I guess, in denial that it's not coming back like it was, and so things have not moved forward in a way that they could have or possibly even should have. And even though we hope that things will get better, things are moving a little bit slower. So naturally, in most cases, when things move slower, that means that those of us who are in the minority tend to even be a little bit farther behind. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. Have you heard of a man named Wayne Casey?
Yes. Wayne Casey, if I'm not mistaken, went to Mark Twain. He wrote a book about his experiences there. He really was quite an icon in this area because of his writings about the experiences early on, basically at Mark Twain.
I never really knew much about Wayne before my grandfather brought him up. He had kind of mentioned a little bit about the Casey family, but more about Frank Casey. He used to talk about Frank being a really good dresser. When we read the book, it was amazing. It was really interesting how he dealt with a lot of the same issues I felt that are still prevalent in West Virginia and that I kind of went through as a kid. But it was also real interesting to hear somebody love West Virginia so much, and despite having such a difficult time going to school and growing up there. So I was pretty happy. I'm a little nervous to sit down and talk with him. I think it'll be a great interview, but I also think that it's going to be an interview where he's going to tell us a lot of funny stories and good stuff about growing up kind of in the coal mines.
Hey, Mr. Casey. Hey. Marcus, how are you?
How you doing today?
I'm good. Very middling.
Me just walking around.
Very middling, as they say in West Virginia. Everybody left.
Every single one.
Oh, God, yeah. This is a rule at my house.
Yeah.
As soon as you graduate, your bags are packed, and you're going somewhere. You won't stay here.
My grandfather said the exact same thing to me. He was like, when you turn 18, you ain't gonna be in this house.
That's it. You're done.
Yeah.
We've done all we're gonna do for you.
Yeah, you gotta get out of here.
Yeah, you gotta go. And that's what the process was. And everybody wanted to go. It wasn't like nobody wanted to go. How soon can I go? Who's taking me? Who's picking me up? Well, my oldest brother left first, and everybody kind of followed him to Indiana. my mother and I left right after graduation, 2 days after graduation to New York.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was for everybody who lived in West Virginia. As soon as you graduate, you got to find someplace to go. Cleveland, Ohio, Cincinnati, somewhere. You know, there's no jobs in West Virginia for black people.
Yeah. Do you all go back to West Virginia?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
I have a son there.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's a school teacher. His wife is white. She's a corporate manager for the Marriott. She gets better pay than he does. And he's disliked for having a white wife who works for the Marriott. And my son is an all-state, all-American basketball player from Charleston, West Virginia. Couldn't get a decent job in West Virginia. Couldn't get one. You know, his wife didn't have a problem getting one, but he couldn't get one. So he's a school teacher, teaches a gifted and talented kids. I did my student teaching at Spring Hill Junior High School in South Charleston, West Virginia. You got to do your student teaching to get your qualifications as a teacher. 6 weeks of practice teaching, they called it. When I graduated, I went to apply for a job as a coach. They said, no, we're not hiring you. You can't get a job here. You can't get a job in Charleston as a coach. 1968, college degree, student teaching. You can't get a job coaching in West Virginia. So I went and applied for the Travelers Insurance Company. I was the first one in the management program. And I made it a goal. When I left to go to the home office for my 3 weeks of training to see what field I was going to go into, I said to my manager in Charleston, could you introduce me to the vice president in personnel? Because I ain't coming back here. Yeah. I'm not coming back. And he said, yes, I can. So when I got to Hartford for 3 weeks, I met the vice president of personnel and I said to him, I would like to have a job recruiting African Americans to the Travelers Insurance Company. He said, what? I said, that's what I'd like to do. I work in Charleston. There's no one who looks like me. There's no one in the other office that I visited looks like me. And he said, well, you know, we have a problem. I said, well, I'd like to change that. And he said, I'll let you know in 2 weeks. I went back to Charleston. 2 weeks later, they called me and said, okay, Casey, you can head the college relations program in the Travelers Insurance Company. And my goal was to recruit as many African Americans as I could for the Travelers Insurance Company. And I did. And
were they from West Virginia?
9 of them were from West Virginia State. And there was a process that I had to, and I went to primarily every black school in the country, recruited. And first thing I say to them is there's racism in corporate America. If you can't handle this, then you can't do this. But if you want to make change, you've got to do something that will make change. So every day after work, we'd meet at my house, in my apartment, and I'd say, what was your experience like today? What happened to you on the job? How do you think you can combat that? How do you think you can handle what's going on? Because if you can't, you might as well go on back to Albany, Georgia, to Tuskegee, to wherever you came from, because that's the way it is now for the next 5-6 years. You've got to put your imprint on. 3 years from now, you can go any place and get a job, as long as you do this one for about 2 or 3 years. Put this on your resume, you work for a major corporation, major 500 company. The door's open for you automatically. It's not going to be easy. It wasn't easy for me to become director of corporate giving. You know, it wasn't easy for the first black to become the first black vice president. And the fellow who did, because I'd left the company, called me up and he says, Casey, this is yours. I owe this to you. And I want to thank you for the sacrifice you made. I was the first black president of the Board of Education. First employee for the Travelers. What West Virginia taught me was, we've got to be better than the people around us. We got to believe that we can do something that they don't think we can do. And we've got to do it under all odds. Racism, name calling, whatever. It's just like playing football. That black nigga, that coon, that son of a bitch.
Yeah.
The same kind of thing you have to go through in corporate America. And you got to knock down the same kind of doors because the glass ceiling really is glass they don't want you in. And it requires a commitment. It wasn't Mississippi, it wasn't Arkansas, it's West Virginia. It's the kind of racism where you know you got to stay in your place and you don't want to cross over there because you don't want to test what that looks like.
Right.
Now I'm getting ready to really test what that looks like, way beyond anything anybody has ever thought about doing, as far as I know.
What was that like? What were those relationships like in the coal camps? So like, I guess for me, when I think of the coal camps, and I don't know what they really were like, but for me it kind of seems like here's a set of houses, right beside it are another set of houses, so you can't help but see the
you see
people
all the time. All the time. I spent all my years playing with white kids. Because we didn't have anything, they didn't have any more than we had.
Right.
Their dad was a coal miner just like my dad. They thought they had more than we had, but they didn't have any more than we had. And I played with them. My mother used to say, Wayne, you're the only color boy out there playing with them white kids. I said, Mama, they're the only person got something to play with. They got a schoolyard, they got bats and balls, and we don't have any of that. And that's how I grew up. And when I started my first year at Mark Twain High School, the kids that I knew were the worst ones when I walked into school. They treated me worse than the people who didn't even know me. They didn't speak to me. They wouldn't say anything to me. They act like they had never seen me before. And that kind of shocked me. And I think if Mark Twain, the author, knew it, he would have said, no, you can't use my name. Because Mark Twain, the author, was an abolitionist. He was not a segregationist. He was trying to get folks together. Now, whether the people at Mark Twain knew that or not in 1923 when they built the school, I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, Mark Twain was the only school in that area. Before Sophia High School was ever built, everybody in Sophia came to Stokesburg. Slap Fork, Big Stick, Tams, Wood Bay, Uri, Amigo, all those people came to Mark Twain High School before there was another school built. So it was the biggest thing in Raleigh County in terms of where we lived was Mark Twain High School.
Sure.
That was a compensation they got, paid coal miners for having a black lung.
That's all that they were giving us.
Oh yeah, if you were lucky. Some got less than that. And I don't know whether that was based on the years you worked in the coal mines or what. But all the coal miners who ended up with black lung got some compensation for it.
Okay.
And my dad got $25,000 for 35 years of work. That was his compensation. And when my dad had black lung and hadn't gotten his $25,000 check, I called Robert C. Byrd. Now, Robert C. Byrd was also a KKK member. He rode with the Klan. But as a senator, he was doing his job as a senator. And I called him after my dad had not gotten his check for a year or so. And he happened to answer the phone. Senator Byrd. Yeah. That's okay. And we were living in Connecticut at the time. I mean, that's how long it took for our dad to get his compensation. He answered the phone and I said, Senator Byrd, my name is Wayne Casey. And first I wanted to tell you I went to Mark Twain High School. He said, oh yeah, I know about you. You do? I heard about you. And he said, is your dad Constant? I said, yeah, my dad's Constant Casey. He said, I know your dad. I said, well, here's the problem. My dad hasn't gotten his compensation yet, gotten his check yet. He says to me, Mr. Casey, I'll take care of it. 2 weeks later, my dad gets a check of $25,000. And the same week he got the check, he passed away before the check got to him. And my mother was able to cash it, but my dad died and he never got to see the $25,000 check.
As these people told us about their families and experiences, I realized how similar they were to my own. While I had left West Virginia when I went into the military, I wanted to hear about the people from my generation who had stayed. We decided that we wanted to talk to people about what was West Virginia like for them today as they're living in the state.
said to me that West Virginia is big enough to have all the same problems as any other state, but small enough to actually be able to make a difference on them. And that immediately resonated with me. We have some of the best communities in the country. I mean, I feel that way to my core. We have a really good sense of place in this state, and that's something that young people are looking for. If you want to move somewhere that has it all figured out, maybe we're not your place yet. The value of being a state of small communities is that if you have an idea in Lewisburg, I can call the mayor, I can text the county commissioner, you can very quickly meet the people that you need to meet to be able to make things happen. And that's incredible. I mean, it starts to feel like the opportunities are endless. You're like, wait, I have an idea and I can just make it happen? I mean, that's amazing. It's a millennial's dream. So that's what I tell people. So we're still losing a lot of people to our surrounding states. That's really where most, it looks like most West Virginians are going. We still want to be close to families and all of that, but the job opportunities, the wages are significantly higher when you cross the border. I think one of the most upsetting things about moving to West Virginia was feeling like there was a lack of conversation around class and race. I don't think we've done a good job about discussing it and even saying, how do we address the race and class issues that we have in West Virginia? And we have to start there. We have to start with recognizing that West Virginia is a place for a lot of people already. And if we're ever going to attract this next generation, which is the most diverse generation this country has ever seen, we have to be welcoming, we have to be tolerant, we have to be non-discriminatory, and we have to be loudly all of those things.
Singing Mary, oh Mary, don't you weep. Martha don't have to mourn. Oh Martha, don't you mourn. Listen to me, Mary, don't you weep. Tell Martha don't have to mourn no more.
I mean, I came back here with just the hope of having a job. I made a lot more in DC with and the quality of life there, but you're working just to live. You're gonna probably make less back here, but I tell you, I promise you, your quality of life will grow exponentially. Wouldn't go back to DC if you paid me $1 million. Yeah, that chapter of my life is done.
I've heard that before. I just moved back to North Carolina from DC. I was like, I'm never going back. I hate it here.
It's great when you're in your 20s and you don't have a family, but when you start getting a family and you're like, oh my God, I have to spend 2 hours on the road, and it's a struggle. That's the struggle right there. I would focus more on the young people and the millennials that are coming back here. Not necessarily the struggle to stay, but the what's next, or the try this, or live the dream. I don't know. We need a different hashtag here in West Virginia and Southern Appalachia in general. My opinion, you're gonna see a sort of the passing of the torch, I think, from the old guard to the new guard. I would like to see a lot more millennials and a lot more younger generation kind of move up to leadership, whether it be civic or business or an EDA director or a business coach or starting a business,
A lot of folks think of the Extension Service as agriculture and going out in fields with farmers. But over the past 10 to 20 years, Extension Service has realized that there's a need for community and economic development within rural communities. In community development, we rely a lot upon just the general citizens of the area to engage and to get things done, whether it's with a nonprofit or whether it's just doing community volunteerism. And I think that as people are in poverty, they struggle so much with getting their daily needs met that they don't feel that they have the time or energy to put towards anything else that doesn't directly support their livelihood. I would say to some degree access to services is a real difference in poverty here in West Virginia than it would be in an urbanized area, because you could get on public transportation. You probably can get to the services that you need in order to bring yourself out of poverty. as the coal industry developed in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and railroads came in, that was a period where there were still families and individuals in the South who had grown up in slavery, and these labor jobs, the coal companies didn't really care what color your skin was, as long as you had a strong back and you could dig the coal. And so I think a lot of the African Americans moved up from the South into the southern coal fields to work in that industry. And then as that industry started to decline, I know specifically in Fayette County, we went from a population in 1960 of about 80,000 people to about 40,000 now. We've dropped about half. And McDowell County is down to about 25% of the population it once had. And my theory with Mount Hope and with McDowell County and others, and why we've still maintained this significant black population in those counties or in those municipalities, is because as those coal jobs go away, it seems to me that those with less opportunity, with less financial ability, can't afford to run off to another state or can't afford to run off to another place. They have to go to the closest location where they might have family or friends, or they might have the means to subsist there. And I think in Fayette County we probably have about 1 out of every 10 or 15 towns that existed at one time. I think we're going to have to make people and leaders are going to have to make some really hard decisions about what communities are viable and what communities are not viable, and that's pretty tough. That's pretty tough to tell somebody, you know what, you're in a dying community. We can't afford to develop everything. We can't afford to help everyone. You can drive through West Virginia and drive down the road, and out in the woods you'll see a row of daffodils, straight line of daffodils. And it's because somebody's house was there. And there was a lady that tended that garden, and those daffodils are still coming up in that little straight row. But you would never know, other than that row of daffodils, there was ever even a town there. Could have been a community with a doctor's office and a school and a movie theater and everything else, but it's gone. And so I think West Virginia is going to have to make some really hard choices in the coal fields. And again, we built an infrastructure to support double, triple, quadruple the population we now have. And in the next 10 years, we're not going to regain that population. So there's going to be points at which we're going to have to understand that we're going to have to let some infrastructure go, so that we can take care of the infrastructure where we need it. Now, that's not to say 100 years, 50 years down the road, we may not want to go back. And we may not need to go back because we increase population, and we may need to go back into those areas. But I think we're going to have to be real realistic about where we spend as finances change nationally, statewide. We're going to have to make some hard decisions about where we put that investment.
For the most part, it's a great community. Most of the blacks historically live in the same place.
Right.
And the nickname is Goose Holler. It used to be a thriving African-American population here. At the time when schools were still segregated, they had the white school and the black school, all black teachers, all white teachers. Well, when they segregated, somehow, some way, they did start off with black teachers, but somehow, some way over time, there were less and less and less and less and less black teachers. And so that's why I'm like one of the few. Like Goose Holler is pretty much empty. I can name every family that lives up in there, and the community is just run down. And if we want to be technical, we have like 1, 2, 3, 4 city playgrounds in Mullins. If you just drive around, there's new equipment, there's painted basketball courts, there's merry-go-rounds and skate parks, and then you go up to Goose Holler's little playground, and there's you just can tell the major difference. And here recently, my family and I have discussed just becoming more involved in our town meetings and things like that, because we just feel like we've kind of been forgotten about, just to get our street salted, and we have to call like, hey, you came down this road but you didn't it's just little things that I just feel like, I don't know if it's purposeful or systematic, I don't know, but it just it just kind of raises an eyebrow. Like, why does our playground, why can you sprain your ankle because there's grass growing up through the concrete and one goal and no anything? It's just interesting. You know, I just as a teacher, we see single parent homes. I mean, that's just the norm nowadays. And back then, you know, the coal miners could go to work and they made enough money for their wives to stay home and be homemakers. Now that's unheard of. You know, both parents have to work if they're even together. And sometimes I'm like, Mullins feels like a ghost town to me. Overall, it's just a grim, sad feeling when I think about West Virginia.
In 2014, we had the lowest voter turnout in the country. We've given both parties a chance to do something good for West Virginia over the last 40 years, and all we've seen is a downhill march, unblocked downhill march on health, on education, on jobs, on everything. And so most of the people that we work in West Virginia are really angry, but voting seems like one of the less productive ways to exercise that anger. We had a few phone banks around the state, and I was working a phone bank the Saturday before Election Day. We were calling through people on our list, and we don't call Democrats, we don't call Republicans, we call everybody. And the overwhelming sentiment was not pro-Hillary or pro-Trump. It was, I just want somebody who's gonna listen. I just want somebody who's a decent person. I mean, it was just it was disgust at the whole system. And we have evidence of that, which is that way more people voted for nobody than voted for either candidate. Way more. There was no talk about urban-rural splits. I mean, that's not even on the radar. Because to some pundit in DC, we're just the middle of the state. And people here are smart, and we understand that. And we're, for the most part, more focused on what can we do for our family and our community to pull ourselves up. And eventually, we've got to build enough power to be able to fight back against folks outside the state, but that takes time. We are among the most generous places in the country. Even though we don't have a lot, we give away in time and money some of the most amount of resources that we have to charity, to church, to community. I think the anger right now is palpable, that when you get kicked in the teeth for 40 years straight, you come out of it saying, okay, we've tried everything else, and now is the time for us to be different. Now is the time where we have no other choice but to unite and fight back and rebuild this the way we want it to, because we know for a fact, we know from experience that no one else is going to save it for us. And that sort of resilient anger, and on one side, and that baseline of relationships and generosity on the other, it's a pretty powerful combination, a very powerful spark for the kinds of democratic action, small d democratic action, that any place that's in crisis needs. So I'm hopeful. And maybe the things we want to be are different from what everyone else wants for us. The set of conversations that frustrate me the most is everybody who wants us to be the next something. You guys could be North Carolina. I don't want to be North Carolina. I don't want to be Colorado. I want to be a place where people's main value isn't creating some big fancy international corporation. I want to live in a place. The reason why I moved here was because I want to live in a place that values family and community and being accountable to that more than it values the rat race, more than it values having nice stores where I can buy nice things. You know, if you want fancy things and to be left alone, West Virginia is not your place. But if you want to be around people who will hold you accountable to be more than what you buy, there's maybe not a better place in the state, in the country to live than West Virginia right now, even before we start affecting change in some of these other ways. As was true 100 years ago, the most important question in America is, can we figure out, you, me, everyone in this country figure out how to bring rural folks, white folks, in common cause with people of color in the cities, because we have way more in common, meaning that we're both getting beat up by the powers that be. We have way more in common than we do in difference. And there's a whole shell game, right? There is a whole rigged apparatus that wants to keep that from happening. And so, the only way that's going to happen is little by little, piece by piece, face to face, challenging rural white folks to understand better what's going on in cities and for people of color. That is different. It's not the same. We can't say it's the same. Racism is a thing. It is not just class, right? And white folks must do a better job of that. White folks must also do a better job of connecting the class struggles here with the class struggles in other places, because the system is not working for the vast majority of people. And you've got one party that's run by millionaires and billionaires that tries to make a few promises to rural white folks, and you've got one party that is run by millionaires and billionaires that tries to make a few promises to people in cities and people of color. And until we all get together and say, as rural white folks, look, we got more in common with people of color and the LGBT community who are getting kicked in the teeth, and have been getting kicked in the teeth the last 40 years, just like us. We have a whole lot more in common with them than anybody else. And if we find common cause, we can all be better off. Not to mention the fact that we could win every election from here to eternity. Whether it's church or school, that West Virginia is small enough that you have to, which is great, relate to people who are of a different class background. And so I think that's something that gives me hope about West Virginia. So part of the reason we're in the economic mess we are is that we spent the last 40 years praying for two things that weren't granted. One was we prayed for coal to resurge, and it hasn't. And the other is we've spent more recently time praying that some other industry will come in and save us, and it hasn't. Despite small achievements here and there, it just hasn't. 40 years ago, the biggest employer in West Virginia was Weird & Steel, and now it's Walmart. So the options for our kids, if you want to live a middle-class, decent life for your family, are slim. But I will say that is not a problem unique to West Virginia. That is the story across the country for the last 40 years. West Virginians are really good at doing what matters. We aren't rat race, right? We don't think work should define us. We don't want to be at work 70 hours a week. And we don't think work should be something that eats up all of our time. Another way of putting it is that I think for us, work ethic here is not just about what you do for a paycheck. It's the work you do for your family. It's the work you do for your community. It's the work you do after hours. It's the work you do for your neighbors. It's the work you do when there's a flood in Clendenin and you stop what you're doing and get in your pickup truck and go down there. That the work you do isn't just the work you do for a paycheck here. And that's the way it should be. Who doesn't think that? And that is the world I want to live in. I think most people want to live in that world, but think it doesn't exist anymore. Little by little, one at a time, one person at a time, one community at a time, one person running for county commission at a time, saying, you know what? This is ours. The time is now. I can see small things are changing. Maybe it's time for me to throw my hat in the ring. Maybe it's time for me to build that community garden or that farmer's market. Maybe it's time for me to work on this piece of legislation that would change my life and the lives of people in my community. Maybe it's time for me to run for office. Little by little by little by little, until the majority of the state, those of us who, I voted, but those folks who didn't, plus those who did but held their noses doing so, come together and say, you know what? We have enough power. We're the majority. We're the majority of this state, the ones who are tired of it and have a different vision of what this state can be. And with the majority, we can take over. We can take over and run this state and its institutions and its churches and its government in a way that serves everyday people more than it does outside interests or a bunch of lobbyists or the wealthiest companies, but serves the small business owner and the childcare worker and the construction worker and the mine worker, and people around the country and around the world go, isn't happening in West Virginia? Because where else is it going to happen? We have the values, and we have the anger and the resilience to build that kind of an existence here, where the interests of everyday people are more important than anything else.